While I am not here to talk about Brad's work or his work ethic, I will say it is too good, because this past winter, I believe Brian had flown to a warmer climate, and Brad felt he had to get to Kikkoman to work to replace Brian. The problem is there was one day this last winter that was an absolute blizzard. It was a whiteout, and Bradley, for some reason, felt he had to get to Kikkoman Foods. So who gets the call when he's in a 3-car pileup on Highway 14 in a blizzard? He can't talk to the county sheriff, the deputies, so I've got to make my way in a blizzard in my van that has rear-wheel drive, and it's a box on ice, to interpret for Bradley, who's plowed in and can't even get out of the vehicle, to the county deputy who he is and what's going on, and that, yeah, he does have a driver's license. Thanks, Brad. Quit being so good. And Bradley, I just want you to know that the last 3 times that I preached from this pulpit, although it's not here, they moved it, but the last 3 times I preached from this pulpit, they were all funerals. So if it goes downhill from here, don't say I didn't warn you. I wrote my notes out because I have 5 minutes and I'm going to stick to them. For just a few minutes, I get to share with you some of the challenges Brad has had to overcome to prepare for ministry. Obviously, we all know that he has cerebral palsy, which in itself is a major challenge. However, to do the work of the ministry, there's a whole new level of challenges that arise because of his disability. While Brad was working on his degree from Southeastern Bible College, he asked me if I would proctor his tests. Now, while you and I take typing for granted, for Brad, it is a major challenge. Because of his loss of certain motor skills, what you and I call the hunt and peck method is his natural process of typing. So his tests took many hours to complete. Many hours. Many hours. I sat there and watched you hunt and peck, and you didn't even buy me lunch for that, Bradley. Now, while it would have been easy for Brad to give up and stay in computer work, after all, he already had his degree, he already had a good job, he knew that he had been called into the ministry, and therefore he needed to get his biblical degree. So Brad persevered and graduated with honors. Still didn't buy me lunch, though. As he began to call pastors to set up services, there were many pastors who couldn't see how he would be able to communicate with their congregations. For those of you that have heard him preach, you know that he types out his sermons word for word, so that while he is preaching, his manuscript appears on PowerPoint or transparency for the congregation to follow. It is very effective. But again, he has the time-consuming task of typing out the complete sermon word by word with the hunt and peck method. What takes a normal pastor, well, it takes us many hours to write a sermon, is duplicated just by the time of typing it out. And he does not even have the luxury of being able to vocalize his thoughts to someone else who could type them down. There are no shortcuts, just the laborious work of typing it out word for word. But he does it because he feels the call to ministry. And if you have ever heard him speak, how many have heard Brad preach? All right, a good number of you. You will know what a blessing his sermons are. They are relevant, thought-provoking, full of humor, very practical, and theologically sound. And yet, unfortunately, many people have tuned him out and never given him a chance because they couldn't see past his disability or what they perceived to be his inability to communicate. And yet every time I have heard Brad preach, there is laughter and tears and lives touched by God. When Brad does preach, it takes a lot out of him forcibly to work his muscles to communicate. It can be exhausting for him. Yet I've watched him minister in 95-degree temperatures with no air conditioning. He had to take continuous water breaks to keep his mouth moist to be able to speak. What you and I take for granted are huge challenges for Brad, but he does it because of his love for God and people and the call to serve. There's one other challenge that may be the most difficult and the most discouraging for Brad, as he has shared his pain with me a few times. Brian kind of referred to it. It is people who tell him if God really wanted him in the ministry, and if he really was a man of faith, he would be healed from his disability. On Brad's behalf, after having talked with him several times about this, on Brad's behalf, I want to say this. Because of his disability, Brad has ministered to hundreds of people you and I will never be able to reach. Brad's disability is not a curse, and the wheelchair is not a crutch. While the disability causes some challenges, it is to Brad what Paul's thorn was to him, an opportunity for the grace of God to be made perfect in weakness.